But for women, I think, and maybe I'm generalizing here, do women whine more and then do men not want to hear this?
Do you want to respond to that? I have a very strong opinion about
What,
it.
yeah,
You got
what?
a strong opinion. Go with it.
Did you push record?
Thanks for tuning back into our second act with Paige and Silka. Today we're continuing our conversation with Alexandra Levin and her husband and partner in the back 40, Daryl Gurney. Thanks so much for staying over and continuing this fun conversation we started on our last segment.
Thank you, Silke.
It's fun.
Well, what we're talking about, and of course we'll link to our last segment, is, and I'm going to say starting over again after 50, even though that's not your platform on the back 40. And I do that, but you know why I do that? Because that's what people search for.
I got it. Yeah, they don't search for starting. They search for starting over. I got it.
Yeah. So on this last segment, we discussed not wasting time when you're looking for love again. You know, so many of us have been thrown into that position, either by our own doing, by divorce, whether we wanted it or not. The statistics are staggering of single people after 50. And you guys found each other. You not only do you coach on this, but you did it. So on this segment, what I want to talk about is that first meeting when you're out there, when you're meeting somebody new. Let's not waste time and put your worst foot forward. How does that apply for women?
Well, do you want to?
Sure. Well, it applies to both equally because if you are creating an equitable relationship, you're creating a relationship where both are honored, both are heard, both are respected, then being willing and able to put your worst foot forward and say what you don't want to say, and therefore be authentic and vulnerable, and really share your deep experiences in life, because that's what happens. The things that we don't want to share most are the things that we have learned from and grown from the most.
And if I can throw out there that I don't want anyone watching these segments to think that means, oh, let me lament about my last husband or about my last wife, or let me tell you how bad that divorce process was. That's not what we're talking about, okay? Let me just give you some for instances or something. You know, like I've talked to people who've said they went out on a first date and maybe the gentleman was in a 12-step program. And he told her on the first date, oh, by the way, I'm in AA and I just want you to know that. Now, first off, that blows anonymity. And so that may not happen on a first date, right? Because some people do want to preserve their anonymity. But what I'm saying is, whatever those things about you are, that, it's not about bemoaning and being a victim and all that kind of stuff, but it's just starting to let that person know. And what happens, and what you mentioned in your last segment, is like once one person even says something as simple as, oh gosh, this is always kind of weird, isn't it? Meeting someone for the first time, it shows that little bit of vulnerability. Then the other person meets you there. Then another person gets a little bit more authentic, and then they get more authentic. So it's a dance of moving there, but by no means are we meaning go be the whiner.
Whiner, and the other W word, weakness, which I some of the comments that we've gotten on previous segments with a similar topic said that, oh, that's the last thing a man should do, show weakness. And we, again, we discussed that on the last segment. But for women, I think, and maybe I'm generalizing here, do women whine more and then do men not want to hear this?
Do you want to respond to that? I have a very strong opinion about it.
What? Yeah.
You
What?
got a strong opinion. Go with it.
I think there's a distinction between whining and communicating. And sometimes women do get a tendency to whine and nag and whine and nag. And sometimes that would shut out even the most willing and sensitive men. And sometimes men do the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I don't know. I don't know who whines more. I just know that that's never a part of the authenticity or putting your worst foot forward that we talk about, when we do this kind of coaching.
Right. No, and I'm glad that we're talking about this and clarifying it because I know that when I, again, had a similar question or the topic was that, like, one of our great experts, Sandy Weiner, said, that's the last thing I want is for, like, on the first date, I don't want to hear about all your personal problems and this and that. Let's just, having more. I don't want to misquote her either, and I get where she was coming from. So I guess I'm asking you, what boundaries would you put on that people might consider? Where check yourself before saying this or not.
Well, you know what? I think a committed listener is always a good thing, and a lot of people just go it on their own. I think having someone who's your wing woman or your wing guy or something like that. Kind of setting intentions even before you go on that first date. What is it you want to accomplish? What do you want them to be left with? And in terms of boundaries, I think, well, the first for sure should be around something that's fun that both people, enjoy so that there can be that kind of beginning comfort levels. I think, like I said, when we started, I went all the way because I knew she had done a lot of personal development and I had done a lot of personal development. So we knew that before we even got together. So I just decided I was going to go all the way and said, hey, let me tell you the worst thing about myself and you tell me the worst thing about yourself. She actually, was willing to do that. But I don't know if everybody's able to go right there, but maybe even just playing, keeping everything above board, at least at the beginning, playing with some little dark secret. What's your little dark secret? And I'll tell you one of mine. It just starts to etch away at that armor and that we all have, and that turtle shell that we tend to keep our head inside of.
Well, let me ask you a question in that regard. So, people watching now, you too, as you said, you are into self-development. You've been around it all your life. You teach it, you coach it. What was the hardest thing for you two? What was hard for you from a woman's standpoint and from you from a man's standpoint?
I got my answer. You go first.
Oh, you go first.
Okay, good.
Have your answer.
So, and this is, going pretty deep, is I had to really, and this will sound stupid for people listening going, why is that a problem? But I had this issue with being able to be happy. And, because it just used to anxiety or used to stress or and then I had, a marriage that went through a $500,000 custody suit and, it was just all kind of stuff, right?
Baggage.
And again, my Back 40 program and book came out of all of that because now I've recontextualized all that. It's the best thing that could have ever happened to me. And I used to tell her when we got together, I said, and I didn't say it till afterwards, but for the first 3 months, I was like, wow, this is really great. Yeah, another shoe's going to drop at some point. She's going to find out something about me. It's not going to work. And then for the next 6 months, it was like, wow, this is kind of cool. This would be a great life to have, And then about 6 months later, it was like, wow, is this my life? I'm actually, so there was this process. And the thing about it was I could tell her. And I could tell her that this is kind of, we'll talk, I would suggest we talk about this in another segment, but there's this idea that a relationship, if you really go all in, it creates a space for individual healing.
Ooh,
so
like
what
that.
was going on with me was an individual healing because I had this, committed partner that was going to be there even as I went through my process. So anyhow, do you want to answer her question?
Yeah, I think for me, the challenge was probably mostly logistical, just in terms of I had a lot of physical and locational and all kinds of changes in my life. I moved out of my home. I moved my daughters out of our home. They went to college. We moved again, within the same year. So there was just a lot going on, and just keeping sane, and I'm committed to staying sane, and I have tools and all that, but just staying sane and staying peaceful through all that required intentionality.
Yeah. So life happens, and you two have proven that you can get past that by being open and like you said, playful and just open to the possibility that it can happen. I think that's a lot of people are struggling with this, and we're coming again to the end. Daryl, you just raised your hand. What would you like to
Yeah,
say?
well, I wanted to say something because I think this was part of her experience, and it's actually something we're really fascinated by right now, and that is that if you're gonna play, the back 40 says your best game is yet to come, your biggest game is yet to come. And if you're going to play as if that's the case, then everything has set you up for that. It does mean that you have to keep open and not stay in your wisdom about the way things are, the way men are, the way women are, and all this stuff. One of the things that would happen early in our relationship is like we would have kind of a disagreement of some type, or, not like a fight or, argument, but she'd be coming home thinking, oh, this is going to be some big thing, and da 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 da. It was all based on her past and her past relationship. She'd get home, she'd say something to me. I go, oh, okay, that's fine. And she'd be like,
Where's the fight?
Yeah, where's
Like,
the
I'm
fight?
ready for the fight.
And so part of what, when you open up this back 40, it's like having new experiences that rewire yourself in terms of what's possible and what's possible in terms of relationship. And I think that was part of our processes, and, to be open to new things occurring.
Let's definitely come back and talk about that. And that reminds me to make sure I tell everybody about your Renew All program, in which you cover all this. And we will link to that. And we'll talk about that in more detail in our next segment on Our Second Act with Paige and Silka.